Thanks for joining us for the Savvy Ladies Wednesday Wisdom webinar. I'm Lisa Ernst, Executive Director of Savvy Ladies, and we are very fortunate to have with us today Bari Tessler. If you have a question during our conversation, please type it into the chat box. If you are joining us by phone, please email your question to info@savvyladies.org. Bari Tessler is a financial therapist, mentor, coach, mompreneur, and the founder of The Art of Money. She has guided thousands of people to new, empowered, and refreshingly honest relationships with money through her nurturing, body-centered approach. She's the author of The Art of Money, a life-changing guide to financial happiness. Welcome, Bari.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah, and I want to sort of get into the three sections of the book and really give people some takeaways as well as understanding why the book is important I really enjoyed it, and I think many, especially women, and I know your work is with all people, but here at Savvy Ladies we are focused on one part of the population, and that's women. So so you come to the subject of money from a very unique perspective. Can you share what led you to your work as a financial therapist and eventually the art of money?
Yeah, so early on, I knew I wanted to be a psychotherapist. So I went to graduate school at the age of 24, and I had already gone to talk therapy myself and knew that it got me in the door and was helpful to some degree, but that I needed other modalities. And I found Somatic Psychotherapy, which is simply body-centered therapy. It just asks you to check in with your body. It says your mind and your body is connected, and what's going on in your body, what are the feelings, what are the sensations. So early on it was learning emotional literacy, right? And so I went to graduate school to be a therapist in my 20s, and my topics were intimacy, sexuality, body, food, relationships, grief, and death. And that's what I thought I would be doing. I thought I'd be working with couples at some point.
That's a handful of things to be dealing with. Yes.
It is, but all the real deep topics, you know. And then it really was the end of my 20s when my school loan came due. And that was just a huge wake-up call for me because I realized so many things in that moment. One, my graduate program, training to be a therapist, we never talked about money, let alone have a whole class about how to help people understand what their relationship to money is, their money stories, how to work with couples. If on the surface money is the biggest reason that couples get divorced, you know, how do you work with couples, to how do you start your own private practice and do the bookkeeping? So there were so many things that were left out of my graduate school that became glaringly, apparent to me. And also then I look back and I said, you know, did I receive a financial education in college, undergrad? Nope. What about high school? Oh, there was that one accounting class. What about growing up? Well, I grew up with a family of entrepreneurs. So there were some teachings that were passed down and many teachings that were not passed down. So financial literacy became such an obvious, glaring missing piece for me, along with emotional literacy. And I decided at some point to put those two together, but I had a little detour. I first learned bookkeeping, and that was my entranceway into this money work because I needed to learn how to have my own healthy relationship to money, and I needed to learn all the language of money, bookkeeping systems, money management, all the things that I wasn't taught, and I had to start with myself. So I learned bookkeeping and pretty quickly was running a bookkeeping business for other therapists and artists and coaches, and they just threw their bookkeeping at me. They didn't even know I had a master's in psychology. They just wanted to have nothing to do with their books and wanted someone else to do it. And I learned probably more about people's relationship to money and spending patterns and values and what's important to them and on by doing bookkeeping from the ages when I was 28 to 32. And then when I was 32 is when I put it all together. You know, all my past training as a therapist, the deep work, where we go, helping people through big and small life transitions and understand the emotions of it all. And then all of these skills and tools I was learning as a bookkeeper, put it all together, and I'm now 50, so this is at 32, I started teaching in tiny little groups of 10 people this brand new methodology. What I was calling it financial therapy in 2001, and then taught it over and over and over until it matured and fine-tuned and grew. And now, almost 19 years later, after teaching, I don't know how many groups of 10 people and then 20 people and then 50 people, I now teach a year-long program called The Art of Money with about 500 students from around the world each year.
Wow. I love that sort of left brain, right brain of the bookkeeping adventure when you already had this foundation in psychotherapy, and pushing those two together just really makes a lot of sense when you think about it. But so you divide the book into 3 defined areas, right?
Yeah.
Money healing, money practice, and money maps.
Yeah.
But it's linear, so you must do money healing first. Can you just talk about the importance of money healing and why it has to be the first goal?
Yeah. So these are linear. When you teach, you have to come up with a framework and steps and organize it all, right? But money healing is first for me. And it's because we were not taught emotional literacy, as I mentioned. And so for many, especially women, and, I work with everyone, but I'd say 85% of my community is women, even though, I'm open to men and couples that are male-female or female couples, but I still have 85. My husband thinks it's actually 95% women that come to me. And it's because we do money healing work. And so the first step is to understand what are the set of emotions that come up around money. For most of us, emotions come up in life and in money, and the same set of emotions come up, everything from shame to anger to sadness to guilt to falling asleep to, anxiety to, joy and excitement and hope and everywhere in between. And so the money healing in the book, in my year-long program, it's 4 months, and then, each phase is 4 months. In the book, I think there's more chapters on money healing. So it's first helping people understand what are the set of emotions that come up around money for you, how to name them, how to learn to sit with them, how to learn to work with these emotions, and eventually put them to the side so they're not so overwhelming. It doesn't mean they're just going to go away one day. We're human. Emotions are normal and fine. It's really how to catch them sooner, how to name them, work with them, and not ignore them. A lot of people just ignore them and want them to go away, but that makes them do all sorts of negative things, and it creates problems. So I really love to teach people that first, and then I teach people to understand and explore what their money story is and how that was formed in their childhood, through their lineage, their religion, who was raising them. We all are taught positive and negative things around money growing up. And so I do some exploration on, traditional therapy stuff of what did you learn, how did your family of origin shape you, what are you rebelling against, what are you continuing, what's working, what's not. And then a lot of work around what forgiveness, and we all make mistakes around money, and where do we need to forgive ourselves or our parents because they couldn't teach us well around money because they weren't taught, a full financial education. So I like to start there. There's a lot more there, but that's where we start. It's not as though you're complete with money healing and then you move on to money practices. But I'll give a tool or two in here. The first tool that I teach people is called the body check-in. When people say to me, what's the first thing you teach or would suggest to help people to have a healthy relationship to money, I don't say learn a bookkeeping system. That's second, and I love bookkeeping systems, right? And we'll talk about that. It's so important to learn how to track your numbers and know what's coming in and what's going out, and half the people who come to me don't. But before we go there, you need a tool. You need some practices to help you learn how to work with your emotions. So the body check-in is something where you just stop and pause before a money conversation, in the middle of one, after one, as a debriefing, when you're going to go online to look at your numbers, when you're going to tell a client your fees, when you're going to go talk to your parents about money, your children. There are so many daily money interactions, and a body check-in is simply stopping and pausing and letting yourself be curious about what emotions are coming up, what sensations are coming up, what's happening in your body, where are you tightening, where do you notice butterflies? Are your shoulders up to your ears? Would it be helpful to relax them? Are you clenching your jaw? Things like that. So it's literally just, it's a practice. It's not like you do a body check-in, you figure out what's going on, and you're done. It's a practice to do in all these daily money interactions, and it helps bring more awareness and understanding to your money patterns, beliefs, stories. And it doesn't mean you're going to be able to calm yourself down right away, but eventually you will. Eventually, in the middle of the car dealership, you can go to the bathroom and do a body check-in and notice you're feeling really anxious and come back in and say, hey, I need to now, before I make this big decision, I need to calm myself down and understand what I'm feeling. And then second, I need to ask myself a series of questions to help me make a good decision here, like, do I have the cash flow for this? Is this in alignment with my values? Will this impact my larger goals? But body check-in is first. So the money healing work is first. But again, it doesn't mean you're suddenly done and you've healed everything. It's an ongoing, lifelong practice to fine-tune. But I like to start here because so many people have so many emotions that are running the show, overwhelming. And so I start here. Also, I start here because by the time you get to learning a bookkeeping system, getting a bookkeeping trainer to help you, sit down with you, metaphorically hold your hand, having some emotional tools is just helpful. You feel more ready. You feel more interested. You feel more engaged, instead of going to learn a bookkeeping system and you just find yourself checking out, or it just feels too hard, or you're just too anxious and you stop. So all the money healing work is an ongoing process, but we start there first.
Yeah. So that's wonderful, and in reading the book, it becomes very clear that if you can't tackle these things, these sort of these inner conversations and these behaviors that you might not realize are very deep-seated and have, you've gained them all along the way from messages. But I think of myself as somebody who has their financial life relatively together. And because of the nature of the work here at Savvy Ladies, I spent a lot of time thinking about the money messages I got along the way. But I found it fascinating when I was reading the book how many memories of shame that are still hiding underneath. And so fascinating and a little painful. So do you find in your practice that money shame is sort of silently working behind the scenes? And, what sort of support can you give to this community about dealing with their personal money shame?
Yeah, so it's always interesting for me, is it shame, is it anger, is it fear, anxiety, that when I'm being interviewed, the person asks about first. And usually that's the one that they're working with, right? So, but shame is normal. I mean, shame comes up for all of us when we're taking on a new topic. When I first started learning about intimacy and relationships, I had so much shame. And all that shame is on some level, you feel you're not okay. You're not doing it right. Everyone else learned how to do money except for you. You're really smart in many ways, but not with money. Or it's just old mistakes from the past that, again, we all have. I mean, shame can come up from, not knowing what our numbers are and being embarrassed because we are really smart and we have high-paying jobs and we think we should know how to do everything, and we don't ask for support. We think something's wrong with that, and so we don't ask to have someone sit down and teach us a bookkeeping system. Shame can come up because we didn't read a contract fully years ago for a marriage or a job, and when that's ending, we're suddenly realizing, wow, we really did not know how to value ourselves at that time. If we were doing that now, we would have read the contract in detail, gotten an attorney to be by our side, would have stood up for our value very differently. So many of us have some of these stories or experiences from the past. So I'm always saying, when it comes to money, I'm not into tough love. There's not one right way to do it, even though a lot of financial men say there are, But, yeah, there are basic things around paying down debt and managing your money and living in your means. But again, because this is so emotional for many of us, that we have to add in doses of gentleness and compassion for who we are now and things that we've done in the past. So this is where adding in gentleness and compassion is really important. This is where giving yourself some space to explore, some of the things from your childhood. What were you taught from your mother or grandmother? And when we can go further, we can realize, your mother's money story and her patterns that were healthy or not healthy were shaped by her parents and their grandparents. And we all have different stories of where did our families come from? Were they immigrants? Did they escape from somewhere? Did they have to leave all their money where they were and come and start again? Were they on the poorer side, a lower income, and work their way through that? And we have so many stories. Or did we come from wealthy parents and we feel guilt about that, or we really have always wanted to make our own money, but we haven't known how to do that? I mean, I could give thousands of versions of how shame shows up. So to know that it's normal, that we all have it, if we would really start talking about it, we would realize we're not alone. People from all different lineage or even economic backgrounds sometimes have the same shame, even though they came from really different backgrounds. That's why I love to teach in groups and always have, because once we get in the room, even from different backgrounds, we realize we share sometimes money patterns. So to complete here, for me, the antidote to money shame is gentleness and compassion, is exploring some of your money stories and then going further and realizing, maybe your mother did not learn how to have a healthy relationship to money, so she didn't teach this to you well, or your father, or their patterns stem from this. And it also, the body check-in for me is the antidote. And it may seem simple, but it's pretty profound when practiced over and over and over in all these daily moments when you really are about to have a money conversation with your spouse, or in the heat of the moment, and you just realize you're so furious that they spend money different than you, which is normal, But if we can be so furious, or we can feel our way is the right way, there's so much to unravel and uncover here. And that's why I think this is lifelong work with lots of baby steps along the way. So that's a little bit. The antidote to money shame for me is starting to practice body check-ins to help bring more awareness and understanding that leads to change. It's to explore a little bit more about family of origin, as you know in the book and on my website and blog and podcast. There's tons of questionnaires or questions on what did you learn from your mother around money? What did you learn from your grandparents? What did your religion teach you about money? What were the messages there? Or as a young child, were you innately the saver? Like, my brother had a bank at age 5, and I was the spender. I had so many things I was interested in, from candy to buying my mom a school ring, little things. But so what was your role early on? So that's a little bit. And then also going back to see, what still keeps you awake at night, or when you're on the treadmill or you're on a hike, what comes up from your past, and how can you bring some more attention to it and understanding, and always adding in gentleness and compassion. You were doing the best you could do at that time. And so now, how would you do things differently? What can you learn from that? How can you move forward? That's a little bit about how to work with money shame.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. Because I'm pretty sure, I'm pretty sure in the Savvy Ladies community, we have a helpline, and that is always an issue that we are hearing from women.
There's usually a deeper layer, right, of what does that even look like for you. I'll say one more thing. When I was writing the book, I was surprised that I was learning more about my own money story, and I've been doing this work for years. And I told a story about my father and how there was such a power dynamic there, power over. I felt he was very generous in moments with money, but then was very controlling, and then would be generous with money, and then there'd be all these unspoken conditions that I didn't know existed, and then I'd get in trouble, And so there was such a power dynamic there that I was learning growing up, that I made a lot of choices I'm never going to marry a man who controls me around money. I need to make my own money. I need to do it in a different way than my father. I have since really learned how to honor my father and love him. He passed away a few years ago, and honor who he was and who he wasn't, and what I learned from him and who he was. But there was a big piece in writing that book where I did have shame around the concept of power, and how to find my own power, and that's not a negative thing. And how can that be? How can you step into your own value, and live your values and get paid well and do work you love at the same time? So there was a lot to unravel for me, and that was a little bit about my own money shame.
Well, I'm going to jump a little bit ahead because you kind of alluded to, I'm going to make my own money. And I, that Prince Charming is not coming. Barbara Stanley's working on that. And I tried to go back in the book to see where I was reading, but I'm afraid I couldn't get to it fast enough. The responsibility piece that we all have. And I wonder if you still see women especially abdicating that responsibility.
So who comes to me are women that are ready to take on responsibility, even if they're terrified, even if they've never had a healthy relationship to money in the past, even if they've never reconciled their bank accounts and never tracked their money. They're coming to me because they're ready, even though they're scared, right? They're scared and excited. But I was on a panel at an event called the Women in the World at the Lincoln Center in New York, and it was all about, I could not believe the percentages of millennial women who are abdicating responsibility to their male partners, and it was over 50%, and that just shocked me, that the younger women were still doing this. But so this is something that's still happening in our culture, where we're still feeling as though the men know more, they're smarter in this area, all these things that are not true. I mean, I just spoke with someone yesterday who her Indian father taught her and her brother equally about compound interest when they were young. Now, I do think that's unusual, but it was wonderful. And this is Manisha Thakur, who I got to interview, and I know you, and she tells this story. And that's wonderful, but I think in a lot of families, even my own, I had a younger brother, and I think he got more money teachings than I did, But that's all changing. It is changing because because of our economy, because it's time, because women are single longer, because marriages end and people die and so on, that at some point women, either it's a big money curveball, bankruptcy, death, the bigger things, or it's lots of smaller things along the way where it's finally time for us to look at our relationship to money and get support. Get a bookkeeping trainer to sit down with you and show you how to use QuickBooks. We also learn differently. And, my husband one night taught himself Mint, taught himself Quicken. That's not how I learned bookkeeping. I needed months of hand-holding with chocolate, and I always tease, or lovingly say with a box of tissues. I needed to stop and have some crying breaks, or maybe not literally, but just stop and do the body check-ins, feel my feelings, have some nibbles of dark chocolate, and continue on my way. And for many of us, it takes months, 3 to 6 months to learn any bookkeeping system, and then a year before you feel really confident. And to also say that I said this, but I'll reiterate, we were not taught this in grade school and up in small increments. So my community is 25 years old to 75 years old. We're learning this all for the first time, or we understand certain parts of our relationship to money, but we're missing things. Even my financial folks, they may know how to do a bookkeeping system. It doesn't mean they're doing it for themselves, and they certainly weren't taught how to work with their emotions. So I think at some point we get a clear sign or, it's really time to take this on, whether you get a bookkeeping trainer, whether you work with a financial coach who can sit down with you around the numbers and values, whether you work with a financial therapist to understand your emotions more, or you just go online and start listening to people's podcasts and read read some of the money books that are out there, and you begin that way.
Right. And after the inner transformation, you move to the very practical money practices, and even in that, you're very caring and supportive to help women through that piece of it. And as you know, the word budget is like the word broccoli, and it's not something that people like. Oh, I can't wait to go work on my budget this weekend.
Okay.
But there's such an empowerment when you are willing to look at the numbers and understand how your financial life is, formed. And I also loved in the book how you rename categories just to make it a little bit more palatable, to really understand what money's coming in and what money's coming out. So I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about the self-care and the rituals that you think are important for women. And of course, I'm always saying women, to incorporate into their financial and emotional lives.
Yeah, when I began, the only way I was going to have a relationship to money is if I can make it more meaningful, make it playful and creative, and things like that. So things that I was doing in my other, in many other ways in my life, I had all these practices and rituals, and then when it came to money, it was like, okay, money is like the dry, boring, mundane part of life, and I was like, that's not, I don't want to do that, and so I had to add all these other practice and rituals that I was using in other areas of my life, and then when I started teaching this, I knew I needed to make it a bit more fun and creative, and that's why I added all these things. So with money practices, I like to say, start having money dates. And money dates are really just sitting down and asking yourself what needs attention right now around money. But I like to set up the space. I like to personally light my candles and play some music and get out my essential oils. Now, that may not be your thing. And my husband even used to tease me because he doesn't need that. But whenever him and I have a couple's money date, he's like, "Wait, go light the candles, get out your oils," And he's he doesn't need that. It's wonderful, but he knows that I love that stuff, and it just drops it into, okay, we're setting some intention. This is important. This is an important area of life. I usually call it a garden that needs our care and love and attention as well, right? But not too much watering, not too little. What's the right amount of attention here? And so I add in all those things. So, play some music that would help you sit down to look at your numbers. Take some breaks, but also set it up as a practice. And I liken that to self-care practices. We've all these self-care practices. Well, what about a self-care practice around money? So money dates could be at the beginning 5 minutes a day. It could be 15 minutes every few days. It could be 30 minutes twice a week, or 1 hour, and so on. And you schedule it in your calendar for a while until it becomes more of a habit. And it's really just sitting down. You light your candles. I always do a body check-in first. What's going on? And then on a practical level, what needs my attention right now? Do I need to reach out to a new accountant? Do I need to check my balances today? Do I need to transfer some money? Do I need to really get better at? Can you hear me now?
Yes. Okay, now.
Okay, strange. I don't know what's going on. This is my landline. We have good weather today.
Yeah.
I'm not moving, but you can hear me clearly now?
Yes, now. Yeah.
Okay, so strange. Okay. So I don't know what you got about the money dates. Money dates are light. Did you get the light your candles?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think it was the end part of that we lost.
Okay. Which is just examples of, what needs your attention right now. Do you need to go online and look at your balances? Do you need to transfer some money? Do you need some more bookkeeping training on how to use QuickBooks or Quicken or Mint or YNAB? Do you need to, research new accountants and interview them? And so on. Can you hear me clearly? All good? Okay, great. Okay, so it's setting up money dates as a self-care practice. At the beginning, doing them more often and then it became, so that it becomes a habit, right? And a healthy pattern. The other thing is that one of the creative things I do is help people rename their categories. So 20 years ago, I was seeing values-based investments and I was seeing values-based everything, and I wanted values-based bookkeeping. And so I have people make a list of what their top values are in life. And then I have them go to their bookkeeping system. And usually categories are mortgage or rent or groceries. And those are fine categories. But for some people to rename their categories, like renaming mortgage or rent to home or sanctuary or love shack, what does it do? Maybe nothing for some, but for other people it makes it more playful, makes it more meaningful, makes it more engaging. Some people rename their debt account, so it's not that damn debt. It's what was happening at this phase of my life. What transition was I in? Was I leaving the corporate world to start my own business? Was I having baby number one? Was I going through a health crisis? I had an accountant who was not used to renaming categories and thought it was kind of insignificant or silly at first, but his wife they had a lot of medical debt from her having cancer and her going through treatment and her surviving cancer. And he renamed some of their debt to honor that she's alive, that they have more time together. And he said renaming it to honor her changed everything about it. So you can rename expense categories, you can rename debt categories, you can rename anything you want. And business categories keep the same. If you want to put a value, put it in parentheses, because your accountant may not understand that. But that's just one of the many ways or practices to help it make it more meaningful and engaging for people. It's your money. It's your life.
Yeah. Reframing things has a lot of power, and until you start using that sort of routinely, you don't really understand just the words we use and how we use them and how we describe really makes a huge difference.
Yes.
Now, I wonder if you have a couple minutes for some questions that came in on email. Do you mind?
Oh, no, I'm here.
Okay.
I'm all yours.
All right. So this one says, thinking about money makes me anxious and I usually avoid it. How do I even begin to explore my relationship with money? I guess they're looking for step one.
Yeah. Step one for me is the body check-in. It really is. That's something you can do for 5 seconds at a time. Stop and pause and see what's happening in your body. So I hear anxiety, but what does that mean? Are you tightening your shoulders? Are you tightening your jaw? Are you tightening your belly? If you're willing to let yourself be curious to see what's happening in your body, that could give you a little more information and maybe even calm you down. If we keep running away from it, if we keep avoiding it, it's just going to bite us in the butt. It's just going to get bigger. If we give it some space and say hello, even just for 5 seconds at a time, then it can start to shift. Okay, so that's step number one, is just starting to do a body check-in before you're going to have a money conversation, before you're going to go online. That's what I would recommend. But for other people, it may be getting my book and just reading one chapter at a time, and then going and getting a snack or cuddling with your cats or dogs or taking a shower or going for a walk. So a lot of people need to take money stuff in bite-sized chunks. It's a concept called titration in somatic psychology. You don't listen to a whole podcast, an hour-long interview. You maybe listen to 20 minutes at a time. Or you read one chapter at a time, and then you go take a big break and do some self-care. So that's how you do it. You engage with money in bite-sized baby steps. That's the only way to do it. Otherwise, it's overwhelming and anxiety-provoking for many of us. How about that?
That sounds great. And because I'm listening and I'm thinking about when I come home and open up the mail, and I just know to put certain envelopes away because they're just going to upset me. So I'm going to.
And then you come back to them. Exactly.
I don't always come back to them in a timely fashion. So I'm going to have to like figure out some way that I can open up envelopes and then do a body check, because I think Yeah, I like to push them off to the side.
And that's normal. I would say get your tea then, and your chocolate, or whatever your snack is, and sit down. And, have a little chat with yourself. I'm going to do this, And sometimes we need a little buddy or a partner. Sometimes we need to do it with someone. Sometimes we need to open up the mail with a bookkeeper for a while. We just do, and that's okay before we can learn how to do it ourselves. But there's something that's scary in there that we aren't ready to face yet, so we have to take it in bite-sized chunks so that we can begin to develop some of that and learn how to face that. Because we know if we completely ignore it, then the IRS calls, or then the creditor, And so get support. Get support. Get support.
Okay, the second question is, I'm my biggest critic. Can you help me stop the inner judgment? I guess the conversation inside, that inner voice, that's the inner critical voice. So,
number one, it's normal, right? We all have an inner critic. We do. Some of us have a louder one than others. This is a tool that I had to do years ago when I first started giving talks. Because the first time I gave a talk, my inner critic was, oh, you've nothing to say, you're not articulate enough, you're stupid, what the inner critic says, right? And so one of the tools that I started using was every time it came up, it's an old tape that just keeps playing over and over. It's to catch it as soon as you can, hello, critic, and you next to it, it's a mantra, or however we want to refer to it, is you counteract it, okay? I am smart in many ways, okay? I'm learning to be more articulate. I'm going to learn how to give talks. So whenever that comes up, you maybe say, oh, hello, there you are again, and then you counteract it with some kind things about yourself that maybe you believe sometimes, that maybe you're trying to live into more. It's not like one day we wake up and we're like, I know my value. I can stand in my value. I can charge, what I know my value is, and on and on. This is an ongoing and baby step, lots of little things. So it's hello, inner critic, who are you? Are you actually a person? Are you my mother? Are you a teacher? Are you just, are you none of that? You're just this voice that keeps playing itself out. Okay, hello, I'm going to put you to the side, and I'm actually going to say some kind things about myself that I'm wanting to live into more and more each day.
Yeah, I think you make a very good point in that that empowerment journey, that it is a step at a time. And, we feel all, we have this come into your value, and the conversation that is sort of surrounding us in the media makes it sound like you just buy a ticket to this conference and that's how that happens,
Right.
But it's really, it really is baby steps, and again, doing that inner work so that you know who you are, so that you can start taking those baby steps. So.
Yeah, and I have a whole article about how do you cultivate your value, and it's a lot of these little things. It's everything from learning how to say no better. It's everything from knowing what you're good at and knowing what you suck at. And maybe someone else would say that, and knowing what you're good at and what you're not good at. I think a lot of us pretend, or we think we need to contort ourselves, and then we feel like crap, which is really normal. And that's a lifelong journey of realizing what are you really good at and what are you not good at, and being okay with that, and learning to have better boundaries, and learning how to say no in a more elegant way. So those are lots of the little baby steps that help you move into being able to feel and know your value more and more each day. But that inner critic is, it's a mind thing, and it's, and so add in some other beliefs side by side of things that you also know and also believe, or that you're stepping into more and more each day.
Thank you. All right, I don't want to let you go before I ask about the Art of Money School and how people can get involved or reach out to you. We'll provide the website and a link to where they can get the book in a follow-up email to those who registered. But do you want to talk a little bit about the Art of Money School?
Sure. So I open that up every January, And we just had an early bird registration, which was just 10 days in October. That's closed now. And then we'll open up again in January. And my year-long money program, I'm starting my 8th year in 2020, which I'm so excited about. I love this teaching format. It's my favorite teaching model and my favorite business model. And it takes you through the 3 phases in my book: money healing for 4 months, money practices for 4 months, and money maps. Because I've been teaching for almost 20 years, there's an incredible amount of content that's broken up into these phases: monthly exercises, audio interviews, written exercises. So there's monthly themes, and then there's weekly love notes of support. I have, there's a private forum. I'm in there a lot, and so are my teaching assistants. And one comes from a somatic therapy background, and one is a bookkeeping expert, and one is a financial planner expert. They're in the private forum to help support. And then I have a lot of guest teachers that I've been interviewing for years. So there's monthly content. It's all stored in a private member area, and then I have a library of literally every interview I've ever done and additional resources. So there's, it's a large group. And so it's priced really well. I haven't raised the price in 8 years because I want to make it as accessible to the largest amount of people. As I said, we get about 500 from around the world each year. And it's a year-long journey to support you through my 3-phase methodology and framework. And we'll open again in January. And I'll just say that I have a whole podcast and blog and my Art of Money book that you can get everywhere online, and that will give you a really good sense and taste of what the work is. And then if you want additional hand-holding and a year-long experience, that's what my Art of Money School is all about.
Wonderful. Thank you. I really love your writing style, and I'll probably read the book a second time because I enjoyed it so much the first time. I appreciated all the personal stories. So thank you so much for spending this time with us today. And we'll send out all the information so that you can get in contact with Bari.
Thank you so much for having me. Thanks for having me.
All right. Take care.
You too.
Bye.